Napoleon Bonaparte was born on August 15, 1769, on the island of Corsica, into an Italian family of noble origin. His aristocratic background and family connections gave him far greater educational opportunities than most commoners of his time. In 1779, Bonaparte enrolled in a religious school on the mainland to study French. By May, he was admitted to a military academy. After completing his studies in 1784, he was accepted into the prestigious military school in Paris, where he was trained to become an artillery officer. Upon graduating in September 1785, Bonaparte was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Lafayette Artillery Regiment. He came of age during a period of deep decline in France's feudal system, marked by severe social inequality and unrest that culminated in the outbreak of the French Revolution in 1789. The monarchy was abolished, and King Louis XVI was executed. In the early phase of the revolution, Bonaparte took a nearly 2-year leave of absence to return to Corsica, when he rejoined the regular French army in July 1792. He was promoted to the rank of captain, fearing that the revolution might spread across other feudal states in Europe. The first coalition, comprising Britain, Spain, Austria, and several other kingdoms, was formed to oppose revolutionary France. Inside France, royalist supporters of the monarchy rebelled against the Republican government. These factions were known as the Royalists. In August 1793, the Republic received alarming news. The port city of Toulon had joined the uprising. At that time, Toulon was France's largest and most vital naval base in the south and housed 1/3 of the French Navy. The British Navy, France's longtime nemesis, along with coalition forces, successfully blockaded the southern coastline and seized Toulon with little resistance. The French forces were now facing a grave threat and had to prepare for a siege to retake Toulon. Thanks to the recommendation of a fellow Corsican official, Bonaparte was appointed commander of the artillery for the Republican army during the siege. He devised a plan to capture a fortress from which Republican cannons could cover the entire city. Once in position, he ordered a relentless bombardment of the enemy ships anchored in the harbor. Taken by surprise, the coalition forces had to retreat. The Republicans reclaimed Toulon, and the first coalition's offensive collapsed almost immediately, strengthening France's position across Europe. As for Bonaparte, he emerged as a hero of the French Republic and was promoted to brigadier general at just 24 years old. After the fall of the Jacobin government in July 1794, Bonaparte was placed under house arrest in Nice due to a denouncement. However, he was released within 2 weeks and was soon tasked with drafting plans for an invasion of Italy, thanks to his capabilities. Round the same time, he also took part in a secret expedition to retake Corsica from the British, but French forces were driven back by the Royal Navy. In 1795, Bonaparte was assigned to the Army of the West to help suppress a royalist uprising. In central France, a demotion from artillery general to infantry commander, claiming ill health, he declined the post and was removed from the list of active generals on September 15th. But on October 3rd, 1795, Royalist forces launched a rebellion in Paris against the Convention government. Bonaparte was given command of the emergency forces tasked with defending the National Assembly. He ordered a young cavalry officer to seize large cannons and use them to repel the attacks. On October 5, 1795 to 13 Vendemiaire, year for the French revolutionary calendar, after 1,400 royalists were killed, the rest retreated. The rebellion's failure extinguished the royalist threat to the Republic and catapulted Bonaparte into sudden fame, fortune, and favor with the new government. He was promoted to Major General and given command of the Army of the Interior. Then, soon after, the Army of Italy. In March 1796, Bonaparte departed Paris to lead a campaign in Italy. At the Battle of Lodi, he defeated Austrian forces and drove them from northern Italy, eventually invading the Papal States. By March 1797, Bonaparte's army pushed into Austria, forcing them to negotiate a peace treaty. The Treaty of Leoben granted France control over most of northern Italy and the territories south of the Rhine. A secret clause promised the Republic of Venice to Austria. Bonaparte's troops later occupied Venice and forced its surrender. As the campaign progressed, Bonaparte became increasingly influential in French politics. He returned to Paris in December as a national hero and began preparations for an invasion of Britain. However, after only 2 months, he concluded that the French navy was too weak to confront the Royal Navy in the English Channel. He then proposed a daring expedition to seize Egypt, a province of the Ottoman Empire, to disrupt British access to India. On the way to Egypt, the French captured Malta on June 9, 1798. Suffering only 3 casualties, Bonaparte's fleet eluded the British Navy and landed in Egypt on July 1st. With around 25,000 men, the French defeated Egyptian forces at the Battle of the Pyramids on July 21st, losing only 29 men. But on August 1st, at the Battle of the Nile, the French fleet suffered a crushing defeat by the British, confirming British naval supremacy in the Mediterranean and trapping Bonaparte's army in Egypt. In early 1799, Bonaparte led 13,000 troops into Ottoman territory in the Levant, attempting to capture key strongholds. However, plagued by disease and supply shortages, his army failed to take the fortress at Acre. Bonaparte retreated to Egypt in May, abandoning the sick and ordering them to drink poison. On July 25th, his forces repelled an Ottoman landing at the Battle of Abuka. While in Egypt, Bonaparte kept up with European affairs through scattered newspapers and couriers. He learned that France had suffered numerous defeats in its war with the Second Coalition. On August 24, 1799, taking advantage of a temporary withdrawal of British ships, Bonaparte set sail for France despite lacking explicit orders from Paris. He left command to a subordinate general. When he arrived in Paris in October, the military situation had slightly improved, but the government was collapsing. The Directory had lost the people's support. On November 9, 1799 to 18 Brumaire, year 8 of the French revolutionary calendar, Bonaparte staged a coup d'etat, overthrowing the constitutional government and establishing the consulate. With himself as first consul, he was now the most powerful man in France. His first urgent task was to counter Austria's twin offensives in Italy and Germany. Napoleon led an army across the Alps into Italy and defeated the Austrians at the Battle of Marengo on June 18, 1800, followed by the Battle of Hohenlinden on December 3rd. A peace treaty between France and Austria was signed on February 9, 1801. Exhausted by war, Britain and France agreed to peace in March 1802, ending the Second Coalition conflict. But peace was short-lived. Bonaparte suffered a political and military setback while trying to suppress the Haitian Revolution, facing financial pressure and anticipating another war with Britain. He sold France's North American territories to the United States in the Louisiana Purchase. On May 18, 1804, the Senate proclaimed Bonaparte Emperor of the French. He was crowned by the Pope at Notre Dame Cathedral on December 2, 1804. As Napoleon I, the First French Empire was born. Britain, having broken the peace in May 1803, persuaded Austria, Russia, Sweden, and Naples to join the Third Coalition against France. France's allies included Spain, Italy, the Bavarian Republic, the Grand Duchy of Baden, and Württemberg. Knowing he couldn't match the Royal Navy head-on, Napoleon devised an elaborate plan to lure the British fleet toward the Caribbean, allowing the French and Spanish navies to seize control of the English Channel and enable a French invasion of Britain. However, the Franco-Spanish fleet was decisively defeated in the Battle of Trafalgar, ending Napoleon's hopes of invading England. He redirected his focus to Central Europe. On December 2, 1805, at the Battle of Austerlitz, Napoleon defeated the Austro-Russian coalition led by Tsar Alexander I and Emperor Francis II. The stunning victory led to Austria ceding territory and signing the Treaty of Pressburg. This treaty dissolved the Holy Roman Empire and established the Confederation of the Rhine under Napoleon's protection. Just months later, the Fourth Coalition formed, including Britain, Russia, Prussia, Sweden, and Saxony, and willing to tolerate French expansion to its borders. Prussia declared war on August 9, 1806. Napoleon crushed the Prussian army at the Battle of Jena in October, forcing Prussia into an armistice on November 1st. On November 21st, he issued the Continental System, a set of decrees banning trade with Britain across French-controlled territories. He then marched through Poland to confront the advancing Russian army. The two sides clashed in a bloody stalemate at the Battle of Eylau on February 6, 1807. On June 14th, Napoleon once again defeated the Russians at the Battle of Friedland. The French suffered 10,000 casualties but inflicted at least 30,000 on the Russian side. After forcing over 100,000 Russian troops out of action, Napoleon signed peace treaties with both Russia and Prussia. He then established the Duchy of Warsaw on former Polish territory and placed rulers loyal to him on the thrones of various German states, turning them into vassals of France. Russia and France agreed that Sweden must comply with the Continental Blockade, which triggered the Finnish War from 1808 to 1809 and eventually led to the division of Sweden. Its eastern part became the Grand Duchy of Finland under the Russian Empire. Because Portugal refused to adhere to the Continental Blockade, Napoleon launched a military campaign there in 1807. With the help of Spain, he later deposed King Charles, full of Spain, and installed his brother, Joseph Bonaparte, on the throne. This caused widespread anger among the Spanish military and civilians, sparking the May 2nd uprising in 1808. Britain sent troops to support the Spanish resistance, forcing the French garrisons to withdraw from many parts of the country. Napoleon took direct command, defeated the Spanish army and a British relief force, but before the Spanish could be fully subdued, Austria threatened war, forcing Napoleon to return to France. The Peninsular War continued in Napoleon's absence, although he left 300,000 elite troops in Spain to deal with guerrillas, and the Anglo-Portuguese alliance, French control, steadily weakened. The Fifth Coalition was formed in 1809 by Britain and Austria, while France was still bogged down. In the Iberian Peninsula, Napoleon had to take personal command of forces on the Danube and in Germany. He defeated the Austrians at the Battle of Wagram, and the Treaty of Chambron was signed on October 24, 1809, ending the Fifth Coalition despite the victory. The heavy casualties at Wagram reveal a decline in the strength of the French army. While France dominated the continent, Britain maintained supremacy at sea, limiting its contributions to campaigns like the Peninsular War. It sent a 40,000-man expedition to the Netherlands from July 30th to December 10, 1809, aiming to capture the French naval base at WorldHistory. But the operation failed and the British forces had to withdraw when Napoleon sent reinforcements. By 1811, the French Empire had reached its greatest territorial extent. Napoleon married Marie-Louise, the Austrian princess, to solidify a long-term alliance and to secure a legitimate heir. Beyond France, Napoleon was also the King of Italy, head of the Swiss Confederation, and protector of the Confederation of the Rhine. He also held control over the Duchy of Warsaw, Spain, and France's allied nations such as Naples and Austria. In 1812, to force Alexander I to comply with the continental blockade, Napoleon launched an invasion of Russia. The Grand Army crossed the Niemen River on June 23, 1812. Russia declared a patriotic war and employed scorched earth tactics, burning everything in retreat. The two forces clashed near Moscow on September 7th in one of history's bloodiest battles. The Russians withdrew, and Napoleon entered Moscow, expecting the war to be over. However, the city's governor ordered Moscow set ablaze rather than surrender. Tsar Alexander refused to negotiate. With no hope of a decisive victory, Napoleon was forced to retreat. The French suffered devastating losses during the withdrawal due to the brutal Russian winter and relentless harassment by Russian forces. Meanwhile, on the Spanish front, Anglo-Spanish forces defeated the French at the Battle of Vittoria on June 21, 1813, forcing Joseph Bonaparte to flee back to France and ending French occupation of the Iberian Peninsula. Sensing an opportunity, Prussia joined, with Russia, Austria, Sweden, Britain, Spain, and Portugal to form the Sixth Coalition. Though Napoleon won at Dresden in August 1813 despite being outnumbered, he was ultimately overwhelmed at the Battle of Leipzig, also known as the Battle of Nations, from October 16 to 19, 1813. In that clash, 191,000 French troops were defeated by 450,000 coalition soldiers, forcing Napoleon to retreat. When he returned to France, only about 70,000 of his men remained, facing over 500,000 enemy troops. Though Napoleon won several more battles on French soil, the Allies were ultimately victorious and entered Paris on March 31, 1814, 1506 on April 11, 1814. Napoleon was forced to sign an abdication treaty with the coalition representatives. He accepted exile on the island of Elba. The Allies installed Louis XVIII of the Bourbon dynasty as the new king of France. Meanwhile, the European powers convened at the Congress of Vienna to restore borders to their pre-revolutionary status, but on February 26, 1815, Napoleon escaped from Elba and landed in France 2 days later. The 5th Regiment was dispatched to stop him. When he approached the soldiers alone and within firing range, he famously shouted, "Here I am. Kill your emperor if you wish." Instead of shooting, the soldiers broke into cheers of "Long live the emperor." Napoleon marched toward Paris, forcing Louis XVIII to flee once more on March 13th. The powers at the Congress of Vienna declared Napoleon an outlaw. 4 days later, Britain, Austria, Russia, and Prussia formed the Seventh Coalition, each pledging 150,000 troops to end his rule. Napoleon returned to Paris on March 20th, beginning what is now known as the 100 Days. By early June, Napoleon had mustered an army of 200,000. He chose to strike first, aiming to break the pincer movement of the Anglo-Prussian forces. On June 18, 1815, he fought the Battle of Waterloo against the Duke of Wellington's British army. Despite his experience, Napoleon was outnumbered and forced to attack a well-entrenched enemy on muddy terrain. The French army eventually collapsed in chaos, and the coalition forces invaded France, restoring Louis XVIII to the throne. Napoleon was arrested and exiled to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic Ocean, 1,870 kilometers off the West African coast. There, he was treated poorly, confined to a damp, wind-swept house under strict British supervision. Signs of illness appeared as early as late 1817. By February 1821, his health had seriously deteriorated, and he was bedridden. In April, Napoleon dictated his final will, which included the wish, I desire that my ashes rest on the banks of the Seine, among the people of France, whom I loved so dearly, on May 5th, 1821. Napoleon Bonaparte passed away at the age of 51, ending the life of one of history's greatest military commanders and most controversial figures of all time.